Greetings, fellow Gothamites. Tiki here.
And Blue Dragon 5.
Take a while.
And Phil Maki.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my saddest duty to inform you that we lost someone. A hero. A Batman. But not just a Batman. The definitive Batman for the past 30 years. Kevin Conroy has passed away, and I am truly struggling to find the words. It's only right that we honor his life and his legacy by discussing it here and celebrating how Kevin Conroy impacted all of our lives. And we're going to do that here today. So we've already kind of gotten the introductions out of the way.
Yeah, so I guess we'll do roundtable, kind of our first reactions, and then go into childhood memories. I want to go first just because I feel like I'm the only one here who didn't really grow up on Batman the Animated Series. Of course, if anyone's unfamiliar, Dragon and I we've been doing a podcast for years and years at this point where the whole gimmick of it is that Dragon is just like entrenched in the lore of Batman the Animated Series. He's just marinated in it his whole life, and I just have not. So we've been going episode by episode. We went through all the Batman the Animated Series stuff. We're going through Justice League stuff, about to hit Batman Beyond. So point being, I've always kind of experienced the man Kevin Conroy vicariously through Dragon. Like, Dragon has always been kind of my go-to on, because I've always heard the name, of course, even beyond, even before I got to know this community. You hear the Mark Hamill, Kevin Conroy, they're the definitive Batman and Joker. It's kind of just part of pop culture osmosis. But I got to tell you, before working on this podcast and the animated Batcave and everything, I didn't really think about it all that much. And so, yeah, because of that, my gut reaction to this whole thing was pretty much, it was pretty vividly felt through kind of like my secondhand concern for Dragon, honestly, because like I said, he has been the one that's been guiding me through all the Batman stuff, and he's excuse me, he's been looking, he's introduced me to stuff like the some of the interviews Conroy's done where he's gone really in depth with his family struggles and stuff like that. And you know what, one of the real things that just really bugs me about this whole situation, and this is the last I'll say about it before I pass it off, is it is such a shame that we did not get more live action Conroy now that he's gone, because when he talks about playing live action, he is so clearly like into it and excited about it. And so I don't know, man. Obviously the man left a huge legacy that's never going to be replicated. It's like, as far as we're all concerned, it's like, I'm sorry to anyone who's going to have to take over the Batman voice in the future. I'm sure we're going to get great Batman in the future, but man, they're all going to have to bow to the throne of Conroy because, he is just the definitive Batman by all intents and purposes. All right, so Dragon, yeah, I just, I need to kind of like live this through. Oh, this is going to be tough to talk about, man. It really is. But of course, I sent a message to Dragon. I wanted to approach it as gently as I could, but obviously it's one of those things where I almost kind of felt like I had to let him know that, like a family member had died or something, because we needed to do this podcast and we needed to do it tonight and we needed to start, planning out on who to invite and stuff like that. So I needed to get the ball rolling on it right away. But man, I did not want to be the one to let him know. So really quick, I'm going to say hello to Cinema Arts 87. He said, hello, everyone. Never realized how much Kevin Conroy was part of my life. Yeah, indeed, Cinema Arts. A ton of people are feeling that way. Kotsky Productions is also here. Says, yeah, this one sucked. Okay, so yeah, Dragon. I don't know. I don't want to take you, like, legitimately, if it's too hard to talk about, I don't want you to like relive it, but like that moment between you asking like what was the news and then you realizing the news, like it's got to be one of the worst moments of your life. I can't imagine, right?
Well, let's just say yesterday did not go so great, and this was the worst way imaginable to start my day, in which I wake up to a message, and it's saying, "Did you hear what happened?" And I then frantically check, like, "Oh God, who was passed away today?" And then of course I see it, and I am in utter and just bargaining disbelief.
Yeah, yeah.
And then of course Jacob then contacts me
Oh God.
moments later to compound on this as I'm reeling, and then
I'm sorry, Dragon.
yeah, so it was so let's just say the worst Veterans Day known to man ever. So we lost the hero. This is of all the heroes to lose, we literally lost Batman. So this is
It's
It's
just
kind of trippy how this
And-
happened right as Wakanda Forever is coming out too.
yeah. So after the
And then-
movie about a funeral, we then lose Batman on
Right,
the DC side
right.
of things. That's just utterly terrible.
but I didn't mean to rub salt into the wound, Dragon.
No, it was
No,
it was
Jacob, you're good.
perfect.
I honestly think like one of the big things here is, like I'm sorry if I get super sappy here, but like with this podcast community, like guys, we've been together on this journey. Like Phil, you're the new one here, so it's like I'm sorry. I really appreciate your contributions to the channel, and we'll let you I'm gonna let you talk, but I'm getting sappy with my with the long term people, with the like Dragon, Jay. I just feel like this whole community, and Phil, you're very much a part of it too. Everyone's a part of it. Everyone who's listening to this is a part of it. This channel has always been a smaller channel, but we're getting towards, we're getting upwards of 1,000 subscribers. So I'm liking where we're going with it. And frankly, I don't want this channel to get that big. I don't like what happens to YouTube channels consistently when they get that big. So I just want to just let everyone know that like we're here for each other. So Jacob, you don't have to apologize to Dragon. Like I feel like I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional here, but I feel like just the fact that we can all come together and that we do know just how impactful this is going to be for him. And I don't know, it's rough, but Dragon, I just hope that you feel the support and the love here in the room.
Right. Yeah, so yeah, I won't lie, there were tears shed. It was not a good morning.
Yeah.
And I've been in kind of a daze the whole day. It's not been just kind of processing it, and then of course just like then. I mean, I guess just to start things off a little bit here, and then obviously we'll get to everything else here with Phil, of course, because I knew one thing for the bridge into it. I first person I wanted to contact to bring onto this was Phil. I dreaded that. Oh, now Phil is. It's sometimes it's hard to get a hold of Phil. Like it's like contacting the Pentagon when you try to call Phil Mackey sometimes. So I was fearful that he would not be able to join us because, of course, I admire the heck out of Phil Mackey because the man made one of the greatest Batman documentaries ever made. Plus, of course, very recently he and I kind of informed him after a trip. I hope he doesn't mind me sharing this. I informed him like, hey. I forget it was like comicbook.com or something. Like, hey, you made the news with the Tim Curry Joker footage that Phil Mackey unearthed from Kevin Altieri. And yes, it was kind of on my mind lately, and absolutely, and of course, this terrible news strikes, and kind of in a daze, reliving things, and just just the realization that I recently, when the pandemic struck a few years back, they were doing I forget it was like a year or two into because it all blended together. They did like a virtual version of the New York Comic Con, and I procured 2 autographs. I procured Andre Romano and Kevin Conroy's, and I always assumed like I debated getting it because I thought, well, I'll just wait on at some point maybe I'll be able to see him in person, but then, of course.
No, yeah, it's absolutely one of those things. It's like for you, it's God, it's like you just assume that he's going to come around at some point, right? And because
Yeah.
I've definitely had that
And
with like with certain bands or people that I've admired
I
too.
mean, I met Tara Strong one time, so it is within the realm of
Right,
possibility. I mean,
right,
and
yeah.
Kevin Conroy, to the end, apparently, while he was sick, he was still planning conventions. I mean,
Mhm.
this was a very all we know right now, it was reportedly a short. It was a short battle with cancer, so it was like a surprise
That's
to him.
awful.
I'd have to assume it was probably like a late stage sort of thing, and
Yeah.
probably a recent development.
And Kevin Conroy was even slated to come to the Comic Con near me, the Galaxy Con near where I live too.
Jacob, maybe you should take the floor from there, why don't you?
So I'm not going to talk about the con I was going to go to, but and I will say up front, I don't really have as far deep bag of nostalgia as you do, Dragon, because basically I was first introduced to Batman the Animated Series through reruns on Jetix
Mm.
when when that was a thing, and I didn't really comprehend much of it at the time because I was still young, but I was impressed by it. I, but and so, but I did watch it. I was like, "Ooh, Batman, that's cool," you know. But I didn't think much of it, and didn't think much of it at the time. It wasn't until years later when I started, getting back into the animation, getting back into animation again, where I was like looking up like greatest animated series ever made, and consistently saw Batman the animated series is up there. I started watching it and I fell in love with it just the same as you guys did. And of course, a big part of that is Kevin Conroy's performance as Batman. He basically grounded the whole thing. It's like he was able to, even the most ridiculous scenarios, the most outrageous lines, and even the most serious of stuff, he was able to deliver with class. It's like he always gave it his all, no matter what. And even after Batman the Animated Series ended, we were still with him, even with the Batman Arkham games too.
Mhm. Yeah.
He did all of them except for Arkham Origins. And I must say, it's
Did he do the new one?
No, he didn't. No.
Okay, I didn't think so.
like he been talking about Gotham Knights.
Yes.
Yeah, he wasn't. That's not part of the Arkham series.
Yeah. No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah.
And
Don't worry about it.
and he wasn't in that one.
If it was a Nintendo franchise, I would know about it. Anyways, sorry. Go ahead.
And as I was like, so yeah, it's like he even gave his all there. It's like in a way, it was like almost a reunion for animated series, considering Mark Hamill was there too. Like even there, he gave it his all. It's like, and he even considered to voice him even beyond, even beyond that. So
I'd like to take a moment to segue with some comments to Phil, if I may.
Sure. Go ahead.
So, Cinema Arts 87,
Yes.
I believe is my buddy Kellen O'Rourke.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's what he changed his name to. Anyway, so Cinema Arts says,
Yeah, I remember Kellen O'Rourke from way back in the day. How you doing, man? Nice.
I love this guy.
Uh-huh.
Some of my earliest memories are of watching Batman the Animated Series on VHS tape. So similarly, so for me, as I've gone on historically, Batman the Animated Series for me was like you come home from school and you're very eager because they have like a block of like a back-to-back Batman the Animated Series come on. You get 2 episodes and it's fantastic. Then followed at some point by Freakazoids. That was my.
It's basically like a Batman movie double feature in the eyes of a kid.
Exactly, and so basically, for me, in terms of the exposure to Batman, it was kind of essentially catching the reruns on Cartoon Network, and then I had like I had the Mask of the Phantasm on VHS, along with the first volume of like the first disc of Batman the Animated Series. Only it was like on a VHS tape, and I don't know if it was like just taped from that or if it was like just the actual first volume on cassette. It was well worn, so I know those first 8 episodes of Batman the Animated Series back of my hand. So I mean, On Leather Wings, Nothing to Fear, Pretty Poison. Just those 3 episodes, just for an example. Look at the range that Conroy displays on those episodes. I mean, you have like the 2 sides of Bruce Wayne and Batman with On Leather Wings. You have the famed line with Nothing to Fear and a little character introspection, and of course Pretty Poison. You have the Harvey Dent friendship kind of at play. There you go. A lot of layers there. A lot of layers. And I remember like when eventually one of the happiest days for me in relation to Batman was when I first procured the Batman the Animated Series on DVD. Oh my God, it's finally on DVD! And
right. Yeah.
And honestly, that was my first introduction to Kevin Conroy, period. Because on the DVD bonus features, you saw the man behind the voice for all these years. Like, oh my God, that's what he looks kind of like Bruce Wayne. Isn't that cool? Wow. And then, of course, you kind of get to know him over the years. Like he did, I never heard him do a commentary before. He did the commentary on Gotham Knights, the anime, the Animatrix, very inspired DC original animated.
Yes, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
He delivered certain stories that we'll get to later. Particularly, our buddy Phil here has a really memorable encounter with one of these stories. He kind of shares them on the commentary, and you got interviews and podcasts like Fat Man on Batman and such. Yeah, that's. But yeah, I'm just saying, like the VHS thing does absolutely bring me back. It was very much like how I became the Uber fan. It was kind of the burgeoning, just working with what you have, and just you rewatching. It's like, oh God, this is just so good. I never want it to end. I love living in this entrenched, kind of dark deco reality.
Mm-hmm.
So Phil, of course, you very much have dug through said VHS tapes, and you've unearthed gold, and you've actually spoken to our betters, including, I believe, the man himself. So I think you should take the floor, sir.
Well, thank you for that very kind introduction. What would you like? What would you like me to start with?
Well, I guess your reaction, just your introductory point to hearing Conroy. How'd you react to the bad news, and how'd you react to the good news of finding him for the first time?
Well, let's get the bad news out of the way. I'll say I was. It was early this morning. I was just messing around on my phone, and a buddy of mine here in Austin who works at a comic book store called Dragon's Lair. He's friends with people in the convention scene, and so he heard it through the convention grapevine before it was really making any of the major news platforms, and so he reached out to me because I'm finding very great kindredness. How listening to how one of you is looking after the other of you as like, oh, this is my friend who loves Batman. I better check in with him. And so that's kind of what was happening this morning was my friend was checking in with me, and my first instinct was that maybe it wasn't real, and I went to go searching, but at that point there wasn't any news coverage of it at all. So I was like, well, if this is real, either well, not either. Maybe nobody knows about it yet because it's just so early, and that's exactly what it was. It was the story hadn't been fully broken yet. So there was a lot of disbelief, and then I think I just sort of like stopped in my tracks. I just was rushing in my brain to figure out what does any of this really mean right now, and you know what's the appropriate response to any of this. And I get nervous with these kinds of things because I don't want I don't like when people try to like capitalize on stuff like this, but at the same time, if you don't say something, then that's kind of callous as well. So it's just like this. My brain was rushing around what's the appropriate way to respond to this. And as far as the other part of your question, I was 11 when the show premiered, so I remember vividly rushing home for brand new episodes of Batman as they were airing, and I was just instantly transfixed with these stories that were just like unlike any other program that I had watched up to that point. There was just nothing to compare it to. I wasn't even the biggest Batman fan. I had a bit of a passing fancy with him from watching the Tim Burton, Jack Nicholson, Michael Keaton film. But I wouldn't say that I became a major Batman fan until the animated series made me a fan, and I just fell in love with all of it. It was the writing, it was the music, it was the voice actors, it was just this beautiful blend of something I didn't know I needed in my life until I saw it. And so I've just been happily obsessed ever since. And when the very first DVDs came out, I didn't have the VHS tapes, but I got the very first discs, which at that time they were kind of doing this, dip their toe in the water version of a DVD where they'd give you like 3 episodes or something like that.
Yep.
It was just like, what are you guys doing? Just give us the whole season already. So, you know, when the whole seasons eventually started coming out, it was just like, yes, thank you. There's interest in this. You guys don't have to be worried about not getting your investment back, you know. So anyway, it's been a major driving force in my interest in both comic books, because I got into comic books after watching the animated series.
Mm-hmm.
And not that I didn't care about them before, I didn't really know much about them. I wasn't buying them. It just wasn't part of that world that way. I was more into comic strips growing up, like the Sunday Funnies stuff. So so the animated series got me into superhero comic books.
Okay. So, so I guess well, we have folks in the comments. I guess if you want to throw some stuff at us, we're more than happy.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
were you
Sorry,
still
you
on?
also asked me about meeting Kevin I completely
Yeah.
forgot.
Sure.
I met Kevin at the Dallas Fan Expo in 2017, and that was my first time meeting him. And I mean, yeah, that was like the greatest day ever. I got an autograph picture from him. I got my photo taken with him. I just went home feeling like $1,000,000. And it wasn't until a year later that I started Stay Tuned, my own podcast. So I never, you know, thought in my imagination one day I'm going to be interviewing this man. It wasn't something I thought about. So and then I got to have my hour-long conversation in February of 2021.
Wow.
And from that conversation, which was amazing. I mean, there was so much in that conversation I wanted to include in the film, and I had to be selective about it. But he just was a treasure trove of just wonderful tidbits of his life as an actor and what it was like working on the series. And so that, and you know, trying to maintain my fanboy composure on the inside while trying to be a professional interviewer on the outside was very very challenging. I was bumbling around my words like an idiot at some points, I'm sure. So then I got to see him one final time, and that was this past summer at the Greater Austin Comic Con here in Austin, Texas, where I presented him with a copy of the poster from my documentary, which I only had like a limited number made, and I was able to give one to him and one to Diane Pershing. And then I kept one for myself and was able to have him and Diane sign it, which was just really, really great. And I didn't really think in the back of my mind that this was like the last time I would see him. But looking back on it now, it's like, wow, I'm really, really glad I got to see him this summer.
Yeah, that's crazy timing.
Yeah. It's kind of a nice kind of button to things where he was in the movie and he signed the poster.
Yeah, it felt like some resolution. I feel a little bad because I had intended to get Blu-ray versions of the film created and mailed out to everybody. I still want to do that, but it just hadn't happened yet. I just kind of felt mad about that. But I mean, at the same time, I'm sure he wasn't. You know, he knew the film came out because he ended up tweeting about it when it came out, which that was just incredible. Like the fact that Kevin Conroy was tweeting about a film that I made was just insane.
All right,
have
so
to
a lot
imagine
of sorry, I was just going to say a lot of it's interesting how I feel like all four of us, it's kind of like a broad spectrum of different experiences with him. You know, like Dragon, you're very much like kind of like the cradle to grave with him. It's like, you know, from a very, very young age. I feel like Phil is more of kind of like the, you know, kind of like more so the you know, a bigger admirer, where it's Dragon, you had like more of a childhood hero thing, and Phil it's more of kind of like a
well, Phil got to meet my hero.
exactly I was trying to put that delicately, but yeah. Thank you. Jacob, you're a little bit more you know, you kind of grew up grew up with it a little bit more in your teen years, and I kind of started appreciating it more as an adult. So it's really interesting how these, you know, of course, through Batman the Animated Series being the show that it is, you know, very much like one of the biggest. I think Batman the Animated Series, just by and large, is one of the most successful pieces of media as far as like it's literally for everyone. Like, it's sure certain episodes can get a bit dark for kids, but they're not going to scar kids, and at the same time they're going to be really rich to go back and watch as adults. So I think that's going to be a big legacy of his, is just how all encompassing and all ages in a good way the animated series really is. Okay, Cinema Arts 87, really quick. He says, for years, one of my most prized possessions was the original complete box set of the animated series. I wore them out, but you could tell it was loved.
Yep.
Oh yeah. Oh god. Oh, back in the days of like the personal DVD collections where you knew exactly what episodes were messed up on the disc, and
Yeah.
oh, good times. It's like, okay, I'm gonna have to skip over this episode because it's just too scratched. Anyways.
Yeah. I just want to point out something to people that, I mean, no one who's listening to this right now, I don't think, is unfamiliar with the series. But I'm just going to say this because it needs to be said. I personally have never been a crazy big fan of like a lot of action all the time. I feel like it needs to happen where it's appropriate. And what spoke to me as an 11-year-old was just like the thought behind the detective work that went into the character, and I love that aspect of it, and I really loved the like psychology that was behind the motivations of the villains. Like, that's what got me so interested. For me, one of my favorite moments that I literally remember, I remember watching it at home and running into the kitchen and telling my mom about it. I was just so excited. Was when they introduced the ventriloquist, and Bruce is in the Batcave and he's playing the two different vocal tracks coming from the same man, and and this mind, explosion of, wait a minute, these are coming from two different brain frequencies, but they're from the same brain, and explaining this extreme version of multiple personality disorder. As a kid, I was just like, what is happening right now?
I'm learning.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
I really did feel like I was learning something about psychology watching the show. So for me, it was a special show because they grounded things in enough reality that gave you the buy-in, and then they took it to places that you would never normally go. But because you already had the buy-in, you're just like along for the ride at that point.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, for me, of course, it was always like I loved it when Batman saved people and used that grappling gun. Those were always like the big the shout out loud moments. And of course, the Batman Gordon meeting scenes. I mean, in terms of like, it wasn't about the action really. I mean, well, aside from the saving people, that was more kind of the byproduct of the action. But yeah. But
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some great action that happens as well. I'm not trying to knock the action. Don't worry.
I mean, TMS is in the corner saying, "Hey."
Right.
No, it's gorgeously animated, but I think action lands better when you are emotionally invested, and then you're like, oh, now the action.
I mean, the sequence that just still gives me all the chills, man. It's from I Am the Night, in which he saves Gordon in the hospital, and they have that intense sequence where he's climbing up. You have the Mike McQuishkin's score, and he's throwing that shuriken battering at the last second.
The sequence that I think animation wise that gripped me was Feet of Clay Part 2 with Clayface's amazing death sequence, fake death sequence, but still a death sequence nonetheless, and just the just how you have this amazing Ron Perlman vocal track of him screaming and saying, I can't believe, what's happening, I can't control it, and you're just like, what is happening? You're, as an audience member, you're just like, I don't know what I'm looking at right now, and that's where I think the action lands even more.
Yeah, we should try and balance this out a little bit here because we could easily just be talking about how great Batman the Animated Series is, which of course water is wet. Batman the Animated Series is great. We know this.
Well, Dragon, like I said, as I was kind of trying to say in my little intro, I do one of the things that keeps going through my head that is very much a shame is celebrated as the man is for Batman, and obviously we should be celebrating him for Batman. Like, do you think there is, like, looking back now that obviously the man's legacy is completely secure? Do you think there's any sort of a typecasting that went on with him while he was around as far as being able to get just live action roles? Because I know he was very interested in doing more live action work than he actually got to do.
Well, it's the darndest thing. When you look back on Kevin Conroy's life, he was a struggling actor. He was a struggling New York actor. He worked his way up, had to get his own scholarship in the Juilliard, I think. And
Seeing his early Shakespeare work is freaking surreal, man.
that's what I'm saying. Like Conroy, he loved him loving Shakespeare. He
That
basically
was a
knowing
trip
Hamlet
to
like the
watch.
back of his hand.
It is kind of funny, like how many people, like how many actors, like started off in like these Shakespearean roles, but then went on to become went on to voice pop culture icons. Like another one I can mention is like Charles Martinet, for example. Like his earliest work was Shakespeare, and in fact,
Man, that's great.
and one of his voices that he used for one of the, I forget the actual role, but one of the roles he actually did the voice that eventually became his Mario voice.
Oh
I
God.
remember Kevin Conroy has wonderful stories about theater, and one of them is he has kind of these moments of like, oh God, what has happened? Kind of these down in despair moments. And what happened was John Houseman would give him a pep talk. John Houseman would kind of saunter into the room and kind of tell him what he needed to hear to kind of get him out of the funk, because he had some misadventures. Like he had to fight. He was actually kind of fighting, like physically fighting with an actor on stage once. And
Right.
Panic of like, oh, and they're like, gentlemen, this is the theater, and then the author of the play was in the audience. He says, oh my God, this is what the emotions in the play are. You guys did, he thought it was all part of the play. So he went nuts for it. But so Kevin Conroy absolutely just, I guess what I'm getting at is he was very much the struggling actor from theater to TV. The majority of his career is TV and or TV movie in terms of
Just
his
like
live
big
action
parts
stuff.
of sitcoms, mostly, right?
Yeah, I mean the ones that come to mind most easily. He played this Harvard guy, Murphy Brown, who's essentially it's kind of like what if he had the bon vivant Bruce Wayne personality as a character.
Right.
You're playing the himbo version, this is at the Harvard tie. I know what that means. And then you have the one I really remember was he was on Cheers. He played he played a guy who was this charming hockey player that or a charming baseball player that Carla really liked when she was getting over the death of her husband.
Oh God.
And I mean, the biggest thing I recall, I hope I have the movie's name right, because this movie always fascinated me. I was never able to kind of refine the title on it. I think it's called The Face of Fear, in which he plays. It's really, I think he plays a killer in that movie. It's really
that
well
looks
shot.
really interesting. Yeah,
where he's like, it's like he's in the rain. He has kind of some, he's wearing like a trench coat. He looks really, really imposing. I think that was the thing that always struck me in terms of like the potential of Kevin Conroy in
sure.
in live action. It was always just very missed, and obviously. I mean, the thing I want to mention is that it seems like there was a lot of trauma in Kevin Conroy's childhood and his upbringing and such. That I think now this year, in fact, again 30 years later, I think he felt comfortable enough to kind of reveal publicly. And also honestly during the pandemic as well, because like in interviews and podcasts when he's asked about it, I don't know if he told any of you this, Phil, because I don't think this necessarily made it into the documentary. I can't quite recall because again, there's a lot of footage that I'm sure did not make it in. But Kevin Conroy, did he talk to you at all about his childhood, his upbringing, any of that stuff?
About his show, you said?
No, his upbringing.
Oh, his upbringing. Yeah, he talked about his father with me.
Yeah.
I think he was telling me how he channeled some of the emotional relationship he struggled with his father when I think he was saying when his father was on his deathbed.
Yes. So yeah, that's the thing. So Conroy, I think in the last 3 years, he'd been really kind of publicly kind of sharing some of that stuff that we've always just kind of. He said he went to a dark place. We never knew what that.
Dragon.
I know the great
The
Conroy.
great Conroy.
I
God
got
damn,
things.
if there's a Kevin Conroy biopic, which there should be, that's the moment.
Yeah. But that's the thing. There was a lot of turmoil in that. It seems like he spoke about more freely when asked in kind of these recent years. And he grew up in a Catholic family. His father, from what I understand, he was kind of he was an alcoholic with a temper, and his brother had schizophrenia apparently, and
Mhm.
he had to be the caretaker to his brother. Which, while he was trying to be an upstart actor, he had to make sure his brother. He was very much trying not to put his brother in an institution, so he was trying to keep him in the house and
Yeah,
everything.
this hits really close to home for me because I have a
Yeah.
brother who's low functioning autistic. So yeah, it's very close to home.
And the most recent thing, I don't know how. That's the thing he did. I don't know if any of you guys have read into this yet. I mean, Tiki, I hope you have, because I sent you the research on it. Kevin Conroy, he for Pride Month this year.
Yeah, I did read it. Yes,
This was a revelation to me. I had no idea about this. And I don't think it was publicly known until this year. I
I
think
mean he didn't. He like that Rosenthal interview went really deep, but it didn't even
Ro-
come up there.
Rosenbaum, Tiki.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Rosenbaum. I'm sorry.
I love you, Rosenthal. Just
God.
thinking of that great Muppet Caper gag. Anyway. No. What? So Kevin Conroy, he put out this comic as part of Pride Month. He wrote it himself, and J Bone, the great artist J Bone, illustrated it. It's called Finding Batman, which kind of got into like what brought him to the dark place, in which he kind of covers the aspects I referred to. But apparently, Kevin Conroy for years had no idea about this because kept it very close to the chest for reasons I suspect in the book. Well, in the story, or that in the '80s. He was revealed. Basically, Kevin Conroy was LGBT apparently,
Yeah.
which I had no idea about because I always wondered as a kid, like, yeah, I wonder if Kevin Conroy really married or has kids or anything. And he never talked about that sort of thing. Apparently, he was married. We found out, which again, I think that was kind of kept close to the vest sort of thing. But he downplayed it. It seems in the '80s because it was very. It kind of cost him roles. It seems it cost him a lot of jobs at the time. It was very not in vogue, and then you had the AIDS epidemic, which was very horrifying for him, and I think for a lot of people, it's very much like the way he describes it in that book, essentially in that comic, is essentially like all of his friends that who he'd see constantly at these interview at the the readings and the auditions, they would just disappear like ghosts. Man, they'd just be gone. He'd be attending more funerals than he could count because there were a lot of gay New York actors at
Yeah,
that.
this is something that was covered a lot in the movie Tick Tick Boom as well.
Yeah.
Drake, do you ever end up seeing that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, that's the Andrew Garfield movie about the guy who wrote Rent. Very similar kind of struggling artist, living in New York in the LGBT scene in the '80s during the epidemic. So yeah, it's Dragon. The thing that really really struck me here, and I honestly think it's crazy that this like I don't know, Dre. This is one of those like you can't make this shit up kind of things. Where think about it, like this came out the last year of the man's life,
Mm-hmm.
and it totally recontextualizes how he took on Batman.
Absolutely.
The whole double-sided nature of his performance, having to hide a part of himself. I mean, goddamn, I just think that is like it's freaking literary how it just worked out like that.
So, well, I guess what I'm getting at when kind of reveal and kind of talking about all that stuff here is that it's so cyclical and so kind of beautiful that in a sense, as much as I love how Batman saves people, in a sense, I think in turn, and the thing about like how many people Kevin Conroy through his performance has probably reached and kind of helped along the way, but in doing so, I think the role of Batman kind of saved his career in many
Mm-hmm.
respects because I think again he was just kind of slated for a lot of TV stuff and TV movies, and I mean yes we should have been putting more stuff, but I think it was just
Dragon, if I could be frank, from the sitcoms I saw of him, like the clips you sent me,
Mhm.
basically he was kind of doing a poor man's Phil Hartman.
I mean, I think they saw like Kevin Conroy. You look at him again; the guy has kind of a Bruce Wayne chin. I think like let's just throw these like kind of deep voiced, big chin guys, which again kind of
Right,
fits into the Phil
right.
Hartman kind of sense of things at that point in time. Then you have the
Yeah.
occasional like face of fear sort of thing. I'm sorry, go on.
Hmm?
There's someone saying something.
No.
Not me.
Sorry.
Come on, someone saying something. I heard it too. Weird.
Anyway. Regardless, I'm saying, like, aside from like the face of fear, rarely did you get like a real like, let's see the range that Conroy has, man. Let's see him kind of do something outside of Phil Hartman.
Right.
But yeah, now obviously, then we get Batman. Of course, he's just channeling all that stuff into into the role, and he kind of was able to get basically the thing that separated him from the rest of the actors who auditioned for Batman, because everyone was essentially copying Adam West. What he did was he played it like Hamlet. He looked at the role, well, again, putting it in kind of a Shakespearean context. This is who this, kind of the theater actor's kind of mind. It's like, well, this is how you would play this character. And then he wanted to be in the headspace of that character. So he's kind of looked at all kind of the worst moments and kind of filtered through there. And then he had the bright idea to alter the voice, which really hasn't been done with superheroes, at least, historically at that time, since like Bud Collyer in the Superman radio show and then Fleischer Superman, the whole, this looks like a job for Superman. That's like the only time it was ever done before Conroy, if I can recall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can basically confirm the whole Fleischer thing.
Yeah.
I mean, Fleischer cartridge is what inspired the Batman the Animated Series style.
Yeah, so it's whether that be fully intentional or not, with the whole why he's maybe that inspired the Collier thing or not, it's unclear. But it definitely, for sure, I mean, it's very appropriate. It just kind of feels right, just given the Fleischer influence on the show. It's good instincts. But yeah, I mean, it's so fun. I heard this one story that he told in which he dressed as Batman to visit visit a children's hospital once, and I would have killed to see that bat suit, man. It's the hearing. Apparently, had like a nice bat suit made or something. It sounded like really sounded really awesome. It was the fact that, oh my god, he would dress up because the kids would recognize the voice. So it's kind of a fun leap that he would dress up in the costume at least once. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, so
I feel like that bat suit should be in a museum at some point, just like a Batman museum.
So when was this?
Kevin Conroy ever wore a bat suit?
So when did he do this?
It was when the show was going on in the 90s, presumably probably before Batman and Robin Adventures, probably in 93 if I'm a betting man. But,
I think so. So the suit probably doesn't exist anymore.
oh, probably not. No. Well, I don't know. He might. I don't know if
you could do a recreation of it at least, because I'm sure there's probably photos.
It's like, and if anyone was to run a Batman museum, would probably be Dragon.
Right.
No, I think Dragon would rather curate the Captain America museum. Bucky Barnes. Sorry.
I do have an impulse with Batman the Animated Series. I do see the Warner Brothers store stuff with Batman the Animated Series, unless it's like the price of an Oldsmobile, I do feel compelled to try and buy it.
Okay, so Dragon, Cinema Arts actually brings up something that we could use as a turning point here. It says he says it looks like a turning point is when the incredible I'm sorry, let me start over. It looks like the turning point when people saw Kevin as more than just the voice of Batman and saw that he was an incredibly decent man was when he volunteered at the soup kitchen after 9/11. And Dragon, to me, that will always be my definitive Kevin Conroy moment. I mean, that's it.
It is the story of all the Kevin Conroy stories, is like the one that perfectly summarizes them. And if I recall, someone had been regaled with this story rather recently.
Yes, that was I. Yes, it was at the very end of my interview with him in 2021, and we were wrapping up, and I actually did not know the story. I hadn't heard it before.
You had never heard this story before? Wow.
I had not heard the story, and I was talking with a buddy of mine the night before, saying, "I'm going to be talking to Kevin Conroy tomorrow," and he said, "Well, hey, there's a rumor about this story that happened in the aftermath of 9/11, where he was in a soup kitchen and he started talking like Batman to the first responders and those kinds of people. And he said, I wonder if there's any truth to that story. You may want to ask him." And I said, if that comes up, if there's time, I will bring that up and I will hear, what he has to say about it. And he absolutely did give me that story, and there was just no place for me to use it
Mm.
in the documentary. It was one of those things I toyed with putting it in the ending credits when I have a few more extra moments, but it just stuck out in a way, not in a bad way, but just it needed to be the center of attention, not an anecdote, if that makes sense.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm pretty sure that story got recapped, and I know that voice as well. So I think you're covered there. So you probably made the right call.
Yeah, thank you. So when I heard the news about his passing this morning, I had already been thinking about releasing that clip like all week for whatever reason. I don't know why this week, but it
Well,
had
it is
been.
Veterans Day, and I know it's not the same
Yeah.
thing, but you know.
Well, that's true. That's true. It was just something that I had been thinking about, and I thought, well, maybe now's the time when I start going into the cutting room floor and start putting, from everybody that I spoke with, not just Kevin. But that story from Kevin was one of the ones that I was like, oh, if I do this cutting room floor thing, I'm gonna have to include that one for sure.
Mhm.
And then, this morning when I heard the news, I was like, well, I guess it's happening now.
Yeah.
So I released that a couple hours ago. It to me is a really good way to showcase that Kevin embodied what it means to be a hero in many ways, and it didn't have anything to do with being a superhero. It had more to do with giving people hope.
Yeah,
And I think one of the things that really mirrors Conroy to Batman in a lot of ways is just, and we've already kind of gone over this, but just to kind of underline it is, triumph in the light in the face of very dark and difficult circumstances. I think that is a major theme in the life of both Kevin Conroy and in the story of Batman.
absolutely. It's again, it's like it's kind of hope when everything just seems utterly just hopeless. Again, like
Mhm.
that kid who just lost his parents, and you want someone who's going to tell you like it's going to be okay, or like we're going to find a way out of this.
Because I got to tell you, like this guy, like the childhood, it's one of those things. I think Rosenbaum did say it, where you always think you have the worst childhood, or like you had traumatic shit happen to you as a kid, but then you hear his story and you're like, oh no, no. Oh, I love you, mom and dad. You're the best parents ever.
Yep.
It's like so.
You know, you know how
Yeah.
when people talk about their heroes and they want to get the point across of how much someone means to them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Um, I I can't stress enough that I really really wanted to uh, have Kevin understand the significance he played, and it's hard for me to know if that landed. I mean, I think it might have. I think it did, but when someone hears it all the time, I imagine that it doesn't sound like anything special when someone new says it. You know what I mean?
I think it might not like resonate with him on a personal like your thing might not exactly stick out in his mind, but I absolutely like 100% think that just the impact that everybody like outpouring that love. Dragon, there was a great story in that interview where the story of the fan who just kind of like just fell into his arms and just started weeping about how much he meant to her, and how he had gotten her through such tough times. And Phil, you're right, I'm sure he does encounter that a lot, but I mean it's emotional, and I'm sure I'm sure it's one of those things where every encounter like that kind of like goes towards like a bigger sort of like, I mean, the dude must have felt the dude must have been carrying around some damn good karma, man. That's all I can say.
I mean, he had to be aware of it because the button end of that 9/11 story is like the most heartwarming thing you've ever
Uh-huh.
seen. Where you have firefighters and cops and all the first responders just like just geeking out about Batman the Animated Series about watching it with their kids. And just be liking it, period, and just going up to him, and then of course you have that architect, like siding up next to him, who instigated this whole thing by accident, just saying, "So, how does it feel to be Santa Claus? Like that was the eye opening for him. That had to be that he has to know how much it means at that point. If like everyone at like the worst day in human history is like, like, oh my god, this is
Absolutely.
Batman's
Yeah.
here essentially to save us. This is wonderful.
He's here to save us by serving us soup.
Yeah. So let me ask you. Okay, so I want to take a moment to, because again we're talking about like how much Batman needs to be. Remember, they're always kind of those people in that store. They're always like bringing up like the moments in the episodes that really meant a lot to them. So I want to highlight some of the big moments from the animated series. And well, for example, we got to talk about Phantasm. Because Phantasm, obviously, it's the blue meth of Batman the animated series. It's the most
Would
perfected
you like to
state.
explain that, Dragon? Just for anyone, I know it's a pretty common phrase, but just for anyone who might not know about it.
All right, so my shorthand that we use for Mask of the Phantasm and how good it is that it's the blue meth of Batman the animated series. And by blue meth, of course, from Breaking Bad, it's like 99.9 to 100% of like purity in terms like
Mhm.
that's in terms of like it is it's Batman the animated series, which is already great, but with everything just clicking and with the budget that can let it ascend to the way you feel it is on its best day, but like fully like it's you have Spectrum and Dong Yang in terms of the animation. You have like we have the fancy opening with with the Shirley Walker's score just like hitting kind of like full on orchestral highs, and you have a choir and everything. It's everything that's great about an animated series on the theatrical level, that it always felt like each episode was a mini movie, and this was the actual movie.
Mhm.
So in that sense, it's very much just the best that Batman the Animated Series could ever soar to. It's very much I would attest the peak of Batman the Animated Series. So that's kind of what the shorthand is there. Regardless, he does give debatably like an Oscar-worthy performance as Batman in that film. That is, again, with everything just being to like the 10th that it could possibly be with all those aspects of that movie, Conroy's performance is one of the best ones he gives, including, from what I understand, the most heart-wrenching Batman performance he remembers ever giving, in which he does the very famous I never counted on being happy. I didn't count on being happy.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Mask of the Phantasm very much like encapsulates a lot of the kind of like incorporating his own pain and trauma into the role that we've been talking about.
Like the way I believe he mentioned, I think it was in the Rosenbaum interview, I can't recall.
That Rosenbaum interview, by the way, if I remember, Dragon, you're gonna have to remind me to. I'm gonna put a link in the description to it, because I swear to God, it literally plays like My Dinner with Andre. It's like a 3-act conversation.
Yep.
It's amazing. But
So yeah, essentially, if I recall, I think it's mentioned there where he was, he delivered that performance, and Andre Romano, who's again Andre Romano, you can never underestimate. Here's I will say many lovely things about Kevin Conroy. I'm the only one who's going to have the guts to say this about the man. Okay, in the years after Batman the Animated Series, and with the exception of the Arkham games, Kevin Conroy, lovely human being, he would always, like when people ask him to do the voice, he'd do it, and of course, and other things, like he'd hang out with Tim Daly for the Tim Daly Show, and he'd do the
oh my God, the Tim Daly Show thing was freaking classic.
When they did like a Batman versus Superman thing, which was great. And the point being, in the offshoot things in which Conroy would come back, or even stuff like Justice League versus Fatal Five, or this and that, and when he would pop back up. Without Andrea Romano, it was kind of a binary to 3-part compound, because you had Andrea Romano she was the best voice director in the business, who at the very least knew how to get the best performance out of him. You had the writing, of course, ideally Dini. And then, of course, the performance, which, again, you kind of lump in Andrea Romano, if you like. So point being, 2-part to 3-part kind of combination there, which gives you a definitive Batman. And doing so, the times when he would just kind of pull out the voice or just do the I am Vengeance, I'm Batman, it was never quite the same, because it didn't have the ambiance. It didn't have like the 15th take that was the charm, or what have you. It didn't have quite her pushing the right buttons. And of course, very famously, this is always wonderful. It's the fact that he did all the oohs and ahs during the fighting montages. Basically anytime you like the scratch, like the sort of not scratch, we had like the wall or whatever.
I remember a funny story about that one.
And
it's like the funny story about regarding like there's actually like a joke that's actually how like when he was actually doing the like the fighting, like the ooh ah ooh, and then he jokingly moan Andrea.
At the end, remember when they did Batman the Animated Series, so unlike many other shows, and this is one of the best things about Batman the Animated Series, they recorded with everyone in the room essentially. So they were there, they were doing that, going down the line. I think a lot of these guys are like, "Oh, it's the first time we've really seen this process done." He did that, and they just joked, "Andrea," is like losing it in the booth, and speculated. Jacob, tell him.
They speculate that's how Andrea Beaumont got her name.
Exactly.
Oh, that's funny.
I like to think it's true.
That.
It's like the anecdote. The other anecdote I was going to go with on that particular one was that like they actually replayed his moaning and stuff during the Christmas party.
Yeah, that's what I heard. They say that's going on the Christmas party too.
I honestly want to believe it's like that. Everybody showed it to the Christmas party. Then they're like, we have a special presentation for everyone. And then all of a sudden they pull up clips of Kevin Conroy going, "Oh."
So that's my point. There was just kind of a magic that Andrea Romano was able to get out of Kevin Smith. Apparently in many very different ways, but she was able to get a lot of magic out of the man in the way she recorded that. Was just never quite recaptured, I think, with the exception of the Arkham games. And it was never quite the same outside of when she was directing.
Yeah,
I feel.
Romello Malone, I'm just going to get to this. He asked it a couple times. He says, "Do you guys have a favorite version of Batman that Conroy voiced, or just the animated series Batman?" I think
that's a great transition.
The animated series Batman is obviously the best one, but outside of that, I would say probably Arkham is probably the most memorable for me.
Yeah, because think about it. You have Batman the Animated Series, you have New Adventures, you have essentially the Justice League / JLU, and then you have your Arkham and pretty much the things and Batman Beyond and the stuff he shows up.
I'm really excited about getting to the old Bruce Wayne stuff.
Yeah. Oh, you're gonna love it.
He'll definitely like that.
Yeah. What about you, Phil? I mean, do you have like a animated series like myself, or do you have like a specific version that like kind of grabs you in terms of the arc or the variation on the character?
It's mostly animated series for me, but I really loved the Return of the Joker movie. I thought that was
for sure.
It's really powerful stuff, and it's. I don't think a lot of people. I don't think that's made it into the general zeitgeist of films that not like Phantasm.
I think it's kind of neck and neck with. Sometimes I think it's neck and neck with Phantasm, but not quite Phantasm. I think it's not
Phantasm. I'd say it's like probably like up there with like a Sub-Zero or something.
I would put it above Sub-Zero.
It is better than Sub-Zero,
but I mean, it's just moments. It's just little things. Like Perchance to Dream, and just the idea of Bruce Wayne meeting his parents again and being confused that's happening, and being given the option to have a perfect life, but he knows it's not real, so he has to reject it. Just like stories like that, he sold it so well with his performance that you just believe it. It doesn't, when you see these things on screen that are like, oh, why are the books all empty, and kind of a weird Twilight Zone moment in a cartoon, and then you just have this very real vocal performance kind of holding it all together. I think that's where the magic comes in, is where you've got the great stories with the wonderful visuals, and then these performances that just leave you wanting more.
That was always his favorite episode. He loved Perchance to Dream. And I attest, I think I don't even have to attest, I think it's very obvious. He loved it because of the range of emotions you got to play. I think he always described it, and as a kid, I never quite got what he meant by this, but I think now in adulthood, I get it. And the fact
Perchance to Dream has always been like up there. Like even when I was like kind of like tangentially aware, like when we were doing Dragon, I'm sure you remember this, when we were going through the animated Batcave, that was like probably the one that I was excited to get to.
Well, what I meant was that I think he always describes he got to play different versions of
no, I know what you mean. I'm just saying, like I have a reference for it too.
No, you're right. No, it is. It's great. But yeah, he's always like said, like he gets to play Batman, he gets to play evil Batman, he gets to play old. The point is, he gets to play different versions where I think he was trying to get across. He gets to play like different kind of angles on Batman, where it was just saying like, no, there's no evil Batman in that, because that's just Batman. Yeah, Bruce Wayne. Wait a minute, just like layers.
That's where stuff like his Silicon Soul come into play. That's where You get to see, like, what if we had a Batman that was pushed to the limits and was willing to kill, and then he had to deal with the fact that he killed someone, and you get to see what that it's like a cheat. It's like an alternate universe version of the character, but you get to see it in the same universe because it's a robot.
But even then, you felt empathy, and they structured it so well in which you saw this is a Batman who was gravely injured. He's piecing together what's happening, and you start the episode off like that, wondering what am I watching? Is Batman been a robot? What is this?
That's where that Twilight Zone thing comes in, where they wrote the episodes like they were like a mystery, honestly. And I think that's where the show really set apart from other. I mean, not that there was a lot of genre shows at the time, but certainly anything since then, that's where it sets itself apart. Is it has this very mystery angle to it.
Like the two most nostalgic episodes I will ever have from Batman the Animated I will know like to my dying day. It's Laughing Fish and it's his Silicon Soul. Because as a kid, it was the fact of it was the very surface level, like Batman fighting a robot, Batman, and what the heck is going on? But then, of course, years later, it's like, oh man, look at all the wealth of material here with this. So Silicon's always got kind of like the crap end of like when people are doing their big fancy schmancy list and everything. They're always like, no, why are you putting
lists?
Yeah, why the people are always leaving like your Silicon Soul off there. They're always putting like in the worst. Sometimes people put in the worst they just haven't put on there. It's like that is not fair at all, man. Come on. But yeah, of course, Laughing Fish is like the testament to that's your prime Batman Joker episode. Of course, very much kind of an amalgam of like the best Batman Joker stories. Great.
We can talk about another thing that's interesting is like his future appearances in future non-DCAU Batman capacity. It's like one of the like I guess I could talk about like I guess before that I could mention like the stuff that the episodes that I remember most fondly from this show. It's like ironically enough they're not really centered on Batman. Funnily enough, it's like the man who killed Batman and Joker's favor.
Yeah,
it's like funnily enough,
favor has always been a good one for me.
It's like it's like, I mean, funnily enough, that's like those two aren't really even focused on Batman that much. But even then, it's like I guess if you're talking about one that is specifically focused on Batman, I guess for me that would be then Two-Face, the Two-Face episode.
Yes, that's an excellent episode.
The Two-Face two-parter, I guess, as you could call it.
I'm glad you guys at the beginning of this conversation brought up Gotham Knight from 2008. Because really, I don't know how well known that direct-to-video is, but it's really stellar. You've got these wonderful 6 short films directed by different people, and it's Kevin voicing Batman throughout it, but the animation styles change, and the stories are meant to be this bridge between the first 2 Christopher Nolan Batman movies. So it's really nice because it finds a way to tie Kevin's contribution into the live action world in a sense, you know?
Yeah. The Gotham Knights always got a bad rap, which I never felt was fair.
I don't understand that because like everyone praises the Animatrix and for good reason. The Animatrix is a very good project. Like arguably it's probably my favorite thing to come out of that franchise because I'm not really too hot on that franchise. But no, I feel like with Gotham Knights, I feel like or I'm sorry, is that
no, Gotham Knight? It's just Gotham Knight.
Gotham Knights is the new game, right?
And it's that terrible show. It's in the works,
right? So I'm like, shit. I don't want to confuse the two. Just checking. Okay,
Batman Gotham Knight. That's the anime one.
Okay, so Gotham Knight. It's one of those things where it's like I feel like you almost had to be there because, like. Y'all remember like the hype around the Dark Knight was huge. Like I was in the thick of it. I think I was like a junior in high school when that movie came out. Yep. So it was very much like one of the first movies I remember getting the big viral marketing push. And Gotham Knight was definitely part of that. And I think one of the really cool things about Gotham Knight and having Conroy there and present is essentially how I read the shorts in that presentation are basically different people's interpretations of the legend of the Dark Knight within Nolan's Gotham City. And because of that, it's not going to be exactly the same voice. And I feel like Kevin Conroy is kind of like the mythologized universal voice of Batman. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, another thing I was about to bring up earlier was like his appearances in like stuff like Brave and the Bold as well.
Yeah, Brave and the Bold, very interesting. We use Kevin Conroy in voices that are not specifically Batman, but are like a, well, not, I don't know if Elseworlds is the right term, but you have like the Batman of Zur-En-Arr.
It's like an alternate world, a Batman of an ultimate planet.
Yeah, there you go. So you have Zur-En-Arr, which basically is what if Batman, it's really funny, what if Batman was Superman, essentially. That's what Zur-En-Arr is. That's essentially what if basically Bruce, you have Kevin Conroy playing Superman, essentially, but in a funky '60s looking bat suit, but like real, not Adam West '60s. I mean like more like '50s bat suit. It's like the red and the purple and the yellow and the whole.
Like, oh yeah, I forgot. Yeah, and also, I mean that's the one. That's one of the ones I did mention, but that's not his only appearance in Brave and the Bold either. He later appeared in what it may consider to be like the best episode of the series with Show of the Night,
in which he played
the Spectre.
No, that's Mark Hamill. The Phantom Stranger.
I couldn't remember. I knew the Spectre was one of them, but
yeah. So the fact is, that episode is full of animated series nods, and it's really, the point being, it's really cool. You have Kevin Conroy playing the Phantom Stranger in a debate with Mark Hamill, which segues us to Sim Arts in the comments, as he says. One of the great Batman moments is from A Better World, which has the Batman debate. And you remember that, Tiki, when the two Batmen are debating each other.
Yes, indeed.
But imagine how hard that is. I mean, let me just highlight one of the great things about Conroy here is the fact that if playing Batman the way he did is great, but if he didn't do it the way he ended up doing it, it would have
broke it up into what, like 4 or 5 different incarnations of the voice?
Well, I mean, yeah, because you have Batman, you have a New Adventures Batman, which essentially gets rid of like kind of the switch between the Bruce Wayne voices. You have old Bruce, and I mean it's really at least 3. So then the rest is just pretty much but yeah. And of course we get like various him voicing Thomas Wayne occasionally, but again, for Batman, roughly three iterations.
2 Batman actors have died in recent years,
which is very sad.
Yeah.
Adam West and now Kevin Conroy.
Fact,
for two different generations, the definitive Batman.
Of course, the Grey Ghost episode. That's crazy. But yeah, was all right. So the fact is, like, Batman could get stale if he didn't. I think the key to his success with the role was that he was able to kind of find the layers, like look at Phantasm. You have like the human transition and the last vestiges of hope being snuffed out in the flashback structure of that film. And in the animated series and the New Justice League and everything, you get to see like kind of like him not just playing a deadpan. It's like you see like the humanity in there and just kind of like the moral complexity at play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But imagine how hard it is. Like he's debating against himself, and you have to be rooting for both sides ultimately, and it's crazy in that debate in Better World.
Yeah. Ultimately, it comes down to a good performance.
But I guess bringing up Batman Beyond briefly, because I don't want to get too into Batman Beyond, but of course the big thing with Batman,
well, I mean, like just as obviously I'm not trying to like just do a self plug here, but we're about to get it. Drake, we have like one or two more Justice League episodes.
Just one.
Yeah. So like I'm imminently about to get into the Batman Beyond stuff, and I got to tell you, man, like obviously losing Conroy is terrible, but it's certainly going to give a deeper impact to the old Bruce Wayne stuff in that show.
The most ingenious thing about old Bruce Wayne was the fact that, one, it was kind of job security for Kevin Conroy when you think about it.
Totally.
Like, I imagine there was a fear in the voice acting industry if you get too old, you might not be able to replicate the sounds that you used to be able to. And
someone should have told that to Disney when they hired James Earl Jones again.
Anyway,
that was stupid.
Anyway, So they leaned into this. What they did with old Bruce is they basically leaned into the gravelly side, which it's like, okay, well, how can you
Yeah.
sound older, more gravelly? Well, he's getting there anyway, so yeah, let's lean into it. And of course, it's the easiest thing for him to do with old Bruce Wayne.
Uh-huh.
But what's so fascinating is that he's not in the lead role anymore. He's in the supporting role, which I mean, think about the directions we go with. In Justice League, he's on an ensemble cast versus being the lead of the show.
Hmm.
Now we have him as a supporting cast, and he does very well. And I think I'm
I
going to tell
assume
you.
he's in most episodes, right? Or is that
Oh yeah, that's the thing. He's in. I'm pretty sure he's in all the episodes of Batman
okay?
Beyond,
Okay, yeah.
possibly except one, but I'd have to check.
Like basically, I think from what I understand, he appeared in every single episode of
Okay.
Beyond. But there's an episode where his only line was like, "Well, get on it" or something like that.
Yeah, that's a thing.
Got
so
it. Got it. Right. I
so
can see that.
Yeah. Let's see, but I'll tell you one. Here's the thing. There's one line no one ever talks about that always struck me from Batman Beyond that old Bruce had, and it's such a great line. It's in the I think it's the Dead Man's Hand episode. I think where Terry McGinnis wants to take a night off, and Bruce gets really serious. I think he grabs him by the scruff of his shirt and pulls him in close because he's really upset by what he's just said, and he says, "One night always makes the difference."
Ooh,
And it was
damn.
like one of the greatest, like, oh my god, it was like one of those and it get even like into Batman Beyond where you think, oh god.
Honestly, even you just telling that story, I can kind of feel Conroy like channeling that to like the night that he had to visit his dad in the hospital, and oh man,
Yeah,
that's
that's the
crazy.
thing. Yeah, oh, for sure. That's the thing. Conroy, we always go to "I am vengeance, I am Batman," which is great, and I think everyone when we go into that line, it's like, oh, that's the greatest version of Keaton's line I've ever heard in my life. Which, yes, it is, but still, it's like the context of that moment is amazing because that's Batman like having a quarrel with his father.
Absolutely.
That whole episode, and that's very much everyone forgets the lead into that moment. The whole like, no, you are not my father. I am not a disgrace. I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman. Just in the big old declarative statement as he's hanging off that blimp. But again, it's just like it's a build up there, and like the man knew how to like drop a line in the best of senses, like in a Demon's Quest. The most intimidating line I've ever heard Kevin Conroy say is Batman. It's a very simple line, but the way he says it, they never captured it well in the recap of the second part of the episode. At the end of the first part of Demon's Quest, during the big old swelling climax, before it says "to be continued," Ra's al Ghul is about to throw Talia in the Lazarus pit and kill her, and Batman he runs at him. He gets knocked on his back, and he says, "I said, put her down." It's the most intimidating thing you've ever heard. It's like, oh god, the stakes are so serious, and now the episode ends. What? But thankfully, you have the second part.
Yeah.
Of course, and I think we should probably talk about one of the most, given the fact that we've lost the man, we should talk about one of the most impactful things. I'm sure I'd have to imagine that anyone terminally ill at this moment meant the world to them. Saying goodbye to Ace in Justice League in JLU. Yeah, this was just Batman essentially saying goodbye to a dying child. It was utterly just this heartbreaking. This heartbreaking moment, and he played it so tenderly and softly. That's what I'm saying. Like the myriad of layers that he applied to the performance was always just something grand.
That was actually chosen for one of the debate answers.
I know, yeah.
That kind of reminds me of the introduction of Two-Face in the animated series.
Yeah.
One of the things that always really had me on the edge of my seat as a kid was not when he would be. I mean, I love the loud stuff too, but it was actually when he looked concerned and they drew Batman's eyes. It was always very specific. Like the angle of Batman's eyes was always very focused or angry. But the
triangles, yeah.
Yeah, but the times where they inverted those triangles in the other direction and he looked either scared or concerned, and then you followed that drawing up with Kevin when he finds Harvey and he just says, "Harvey, no." And it's just like this moment of like, oh my gosh, Batman, this character, this guy that I look to for a source of strength is taken aback by the violence that just happened to his best friend. It's powerful.
Even though they did have to redo that scene in the flashback episode.
Yeah.
It's like, because let's all be honest, like the voice acting on its own, great. The animation on its own, great. Together, they don't really work. In that particular scene, anyway. I mean,
I'm not following your example, but
in the scene you were just talking about, Harvey, no.
There's kind of like there's a bit of an I think Jacob kind of keeps lingering on this. There's this animation hiccup in that scene that does. I mean, I think the Harvey knows the important part of that scene, but yes, I don't know if you look at it with a
Basically, it looks like in the animation that he's like screaming the line or
like he does the dramatic pullback saying no. It's kind of
It's like the animation and the voice acting don't particularly line up at that particular moment.
Oh, I never got that impression from. I know what you're talking about. That never struck me that way. But
now that's just me, and it's not really a big deal. Like I said, on their own, they're great, but
yeah. Okay, well, here we go. It says okay, so Simart says, Nicola Knight, this has been very heartwarming, guys. Never forget you, Kevin, the Batman. Yeah, take that, Pattinson. The
Batman. Pattinson's just in the corner, just shedding a single emo tear.
Yeah. The only way it's going to work is you put that mask on, man.
So yeah, we have Cinema Arts. Also, I wanted to highlight Lucas Green from way back in the day. Lucas, I think I vaguely remember you popping up, but he said, Kevin Conroy, too many fans. He was our Batman, DCAU, Arkham Knight games, several animated films and projects. Mm-hmm. To many fans, he is Batman. Kevin Conroy is vengeance, is the Knight. He is Batman.
Well, I'm going to talk about the Arkham game for a moment.
All right, I can also help with this one.
So the coolest thing about the Arkham games is that they gave. So we have Kevin Conroy's been the definitive Batman through the DCAU for essentially 30 years, and you then have factored in there is like you have these games essentially introducing Batman to another generation, but as a PG-13 approach. So it's kind of like if anyone, for some reason, I don't know why, has not seen the DCAU Batman or need like a fresh introductory point, you have 3 games. Admittedly, 2 better than the third. The two of the games a little better than the last one, but let's not quibble. You have 3 games that do give you kind of a great entry point into essentially Batman the Animated Series, but in kind of a more PG-13 kind of gamer context. Which also rather,
first game also saw the return of Mark Hamill, and who returned for the next 3 games, and also though she was replaced in City and Night, got Helene Sorkin again for Harley Quinn.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool. You had somewhat of a tribute to Batman the Animated Series in sort of a modern update, so that was always quite fascinating. You had Dini involved in the writing, at least on 2 out of 3 of those.
But to take over Harley Quinn was another Batman the Animated Series alumni, Tara Strong.
You mentioned 30 years, and I feel like we really shouldn't close the night out until before we take a moment to acknowledge most people don't ever get to have a career moment that lasts them 30 years, let alone get to live to see it live on like that. So as sad as today is for everyone, I think it's really wonderful that Kevin was here for the 30th anniversary in September, and he at least go to at least one more convention, and I really think that appearance he made here in Austin, I feel like maybe was more for him than it was for the fans, because I'm sure he knew he was not doing so well, and I'm making the assumption, but maybe it was something that he felt like he needed to do in part just to get one more experience in.
I mean, he was still planning. I mean, after that point, so I mean, he was that goes to say something. I mean, even though at that point, I mean, Jacob, how long ago was that convention posted?
That was June, I want to say, of this year.
I don't know when the listings for the con I was mentioning was put up, because I only checked on it recently, but he was slated to be there.
Yeah, that's the fact.
Well, he also, I mean, I'm not trying to take away from future cons. I'm just saying I feel like maybe he really wanted to take it all in, and I also think he loved his fans and wanted to give continue giving to them. So I mean, for as sad as today is, I think we should also just remember he loved what he did, and he loved the people that loved him, and he just wanted to do as much of that as he could while he could, I think.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I just think it's so crazy how all these, full circle things, the 30th anniversary, the last conventions, him finally opening up about his sexuality, and that kind of being like a big, almost like a game changer as far as how we look at his approach to the performance. I mean, I imagine that comic dragon. I hope that it got some good circulation, because I imagine it could help a lot of young LGBT people out there with struggling with their identity. So yeah, it's just crazy how even up till the end, this dude was still just like really just going out of his way to. I mean, I think this is the last thing I have to say. I really do think stuff like that, stuff like the comic. I like that, like having a comic like that out there. Like I'm not LGBT myself, but I certainly have a lot of friends who are, and man, it's I get emotional just thinking about like how that was like his last great gift to the world, almost. I feel like was that comic. So
Well, you have to also imagine it must have been a great gift to himself, because I can't imagine having to live a life trying to hide something like that. And maybe it was a way of him going, okay, well, I don't know how many more days I have left, and so I would rather the world hear it from me than maybe from a rumor mill or something like that after I'm gone. Again, I can't speak for him, but that's what I've been thinking about this all day, and I think maybe that he was sort of tying up some loose ends by doing that earlier this year.
And we all know that all the people he's worked with, other people in the industry, their reactions have been all over. Like everybody is reeling from this tragic passing.
I feel my heart goes out to Mark Hamill, because they were inseparable.
Oh man, right.
Like Mark,
the other half.
Yeah, Mark Hamill actually did release a tweet recently saying like, hold on, I need to pull it back up again. Like, stunned by the loss of this brilliant actor. Words can't express my admiration and respect for the man. I loved him like a brother. R.I.P. Kevin Conroy.
I'm really happy that Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy, they were able to get things like, I know it wasn't super well received after that first 30 minutes, but they got the Killing Joke in terms of they got like the famous Batman Joker encounter. They both of them wanted to play ever since.
The important thing about that project is that it actually happened, right?
I mean, the important thing is that they wanted to play that scene
right.
At that time, like 24 years, and they were able to, and they played it very wonderfully at the end of that movie. And then, I mean, beyond that, if you want the more kind of well-received version, you have the Arkham games, in which you have kind of a closing of the books for those two characters, almost. It's very much, yeah.
It's and Paul Dini posted just a single picture of Batman. It's like all the people giving their condolences, like saying how much of a loss it is, like how great it was.
No, I mean, and we didn't even bring this up, but I think it's worth mentioning that, of course, famously in his backstory, he was roommates with Robin Williams. And I definitely think that this is going to be one of those celebrity deaths. Like, we have had a lot of celebrity deaths this year, a lot of them, and it's kicked our ass collectively. But this is going to be one of those celebrity deaths where you just stop in your damn tracks. And I feel like it's literally going to have like the industry as a whole is going to feel the waves of this, just because of how much of an icon he was, and just how entrenched into pop culture and into like everyone's lives this show was. And
that's why a really good way to remember somebody, I think we want to keep this in mind, is go and watch your favorite episode, go and watch your favorite movie.
Totally.
Do something that will celebrate his memory, and not that we shouldn't feel sad, but along with the sad, do something where Kevin makes you smile.
It's like celebrate his life, not mourn his death.
Right. And I think anyone would really want that. So, us us talking about him tonight. I think that's one way to do it. I think again, curling up with your favorite episode or a favorite interview or anything like that. So I would encourage everybody to do something like that.
Like I remember just earlier this morning, I saw like your post on Facebook to you about it was like your about how his Dragon's reaction to Kevin Conroy. I was like, wait, Kevin Conroy, what happened?
Oh God, yeah. No,
And then
I
I
didn't
was
mention Dragon by name, but I said like my heart goes out to people like my co-host who grew up with this man as a childhood hero. Yeah.
it's like yeah, I was like then I like went to other official sources. I was like, oh my god.
Uh-huh.
It's like so yeah, it's like definitely like that's a good idea. That's good though, Phil. Like find your favorite episode or just go to a compilation, watch interviews with him, celebrate the life of Kevin Conroy, and celebrate the life of our Batman.
Right. Phil, Jacob, do you have anything else to add to this? Because I think we're gonna pretty much wrap up.
It's like rest in peace, Kevin Conroy. You've earned the right to take off the cowl.
Right. Phil,
I'll tell you right now, one little thing.
Yeah.
That Kevin told me, and it is in the film, and he was talking about Adam West, and he was talking about how he felt some trepidation in trying to fill some very big shoes that Adam had left before, and how Adam West said, it's a great character to play. He's yours now, and you do with him, what you'll do. And I think that's important to remember. Is that Kevin has left a permanent, mark on history with the character. It's okay if other people play the character. It doesn't mean we're replacing Kevin Conroy by any stretch of the imagination. Just celebrate the performances that make you love him the most, and I would say that's the best way to remember his legacy.
All right, well said. Well said. Okay, I want to give a big thanks to Cinema Arts 87, Romello Malone, Lucas Green, and I believe Film. Hold on.
Did you say Koski Productions?
Yes, thank you. I believe Koski Productions also popped up. And guys, just my last word on this whole thing is I really, honestly, today for me has been one of the most powerful days as far as it's almost been kind of emotional whiplash for me because I didn't hate Black Panther Wakanda Forever, but it was just like it was yet another MCU movie where I'm like, it's got good qualities to it, but overall I'm just not entirely stoked on it. I think I'm pretty much about checked out on the MCU. And I the only reason I bring that up is because obviously me being checked out of the MCU, that's going to have some effect on the channel, and I very much appreciate folks like Jacob and anyone else, Romello, anyone else who steps up to the plate and does, comes onto this channel for the Marvel stuff and other stuff like that I'm kind of checked out of. But I got to tell you, this whole Kevin Conroy thing, man. As tragic as it is, it's been a real eye opener. It's been a real kind of refresher to me. As far as this channel, we do make a difference. This is, it's not a big channel by any means, but we are a community. There are people who consistently watch us, and I mean, fuck, people like Dragon, me, Jacob. I mean, it's these are people you guys, genuinely, some of my best friends in the world have come out of this channel. So I want to just express my gratitude there because I really do think the animated Batcave was a big, that was a stepping stone, man. I honestly don't think the channel and the community would be here today without the animated Batcave and without that kind of Dragon. I really think that the animated Batcave, I think you'll agree with this, that show, that series that we started almost kind of cemented our dynamics, cemented our rapport with each other. That kind of bled over into everything else we did. So man, I owe a lot of gratitude. That's one of those things where it's like I'm still kind of processing. Like I said, I didn't grow up with this guy or anything. I didn't watch the show as a kid, but even an adult, even professionally, he had an impact on me. So it's crazy to think about the ripple effects. All right, Dragon, and I will leave it to you, sir, for your last words.
All right. I think we all imagined Kevin Conroy would live long enough to reach the same age as old Bruce. I know I did. I think we all kind of like imagined that there'd be a day or there'd be a time where people could joke like, well, he's old enough to be old Bruce Wayne right now. Let's put him in live action. Let's do it. If Keaton's not going to do it, let's get Kevin Conroy in there. And sadly, well, this was not the case. But I'd like to draw inspiration from something we mentioned earlier. I'd like to draw inspiration from a real life moment that always fascinated and stuck with Kevin Conroy, which of course is when his father died. His last words were, "The Great Conroy."
Oh man, oh god,
And
yeah.
he looked with a remorseful and regretful look over his life. Now, I'd like to think Kevin Conroy had a moment like this, but instead he looked back and what he thought of was the love and the goodwill he helped put out there in this world. And as he you know as he did through his craft, he inspired millions and taught them, like myself, right from wrong for
Uh-huh.
3 decades. And how he made that character better than he ever was up to that point. And in every way that in every way that counts, he brought him to life. And for every man, woman, and child, I think they could say the same, that when they're reading a comic or they're closing their eyes and they're thinking of, or just thinking of Batman, it's his voice. That's Batman. That's what he sounds like. Because, well, to put it frankly, he was vengeance, he was the knight, but he will always be Batman. But also so much more.